They called him a dreamer, a scholar, an archaeologist. They were wrong. He was a weapon forged in the halls of Oxford and unleashed on the deserts of Arabia. This is the story of how one man, Thomas Edward Lawrence, took on the might of the 600-year-old Ottoman Empire, and won. But this wasn't a war of armies. It was a war of the mind. And by the end of this video, you will understand the secret tactics he invented that humiliated his enemies and are still used by special forces across the globe today. The year is 1916. The world is on fire. The Great War has devolved into a senseless, grinding slaughter in the mud of the Western Front. The British Empire, the most powerful force on earth, is bleeding men and treasure at a catastrophic rate. A year earlier, a bold plan to knock the Ottoman Empire out of the war had ended in a humiliating disaster on the beaches of Gallipoli. A new front was needed, a new idea, a new kind of war. In a sweltering, paper-strewn office in Cairo, a junior intelligence officer named T.E. Lawrence was watching and waiting. He was not a soldier. At a mere 5 feet, 5 inches tall, he was an unassuming figure, a brilliant but quiet archaeologist who had spent years wandering the deserts of the Levant, mapping ancient ruins. But in doing so, he had mapped something far more important: the soul of the Arab people. He knew their languages, their customs, their fierce codes of honor, and their burning resentment of their Ottoman masters. While the generals in London saw only a backwater theatre of war, Lawrence saw a powder keg waiting for a spark. He saw the simmering Arab revolt, led by Sheriff Hussein of Mecca, not as a minor tribal squabble, but as the key to shattering an entire empire from within. His superiors, steeped in the doctrine of conventional warfare, were skeptical. They sent him on what they thought was a simple fact-finding mission: make contact with the rebels, assess their strength, and report back. It was the single greatest miscalculation of the war, because they didn't send a diplomat. They sent a kingmaker. When Lawrence arrived in the Arabian desert, he found a rebellion on the verge of collapse. The Arab forces, though brave, were a disorganized collection of rival tribes, armed with ancient rifles and facing a modern, German-equipped Ottoman army. They had captured Mecca, but were now pinned down, unable to advance. Lawrence saw the truth in an instant. To fight the Ottomans on their own terms, in pitched battles, was suicide. The Arabs' greatest weapon wasn't their numbers, it was the desert itself. The desert was their fortress, their ally, their sea. And in this sea, the Ottoman army was a clumsy, lumbering beast, tied to a single fragile lifeline: the Hejaz Railway. This 1,000-mile ribbon of steel was the artery that pumped soldiers, guns, and supplies from the heart of the empire down to its garrisons in Arabia. Cut the artery, and the beast would wither and die. This was Lawrence's revolutionary idea: not a war of annihilation, but a war of paralysis, a new kind of warfare, guerrilla warfare. He shed his stiff British uniform for the flowing white robes of a desert prince. He ate their food, slept under their stars, and learned to ride a camel like a man born to the sand. He earned their trust not by issuing orders, but by sharing their hardships and demonstrating his almost inhuman endurance. He united the fractious tribes, not with gold, but with a shared vision of freedom and by appealing to their warrior spirit. He met with Prince Faisal, the charismatic leader of the revolt, and forged a bond of brotherhood that would change the world. Then, he introduced them to a new god of the desert: dynamite. He taught them how to become ghosts, to strike without warning and vanish back into the sands. The attacks began. A bridge would disappear in the night. A section of track would be twisted into scrap metal. A supply train would erupt in a ball of fire and smoke, what Lawrence grimly called his tulips of steel. For the Ottoman commanders, it was a nightmare. They were fighting an enemy they could not see, an army with no front line and no capital. Every rock could hide a rifleman. Every dune could conceal an army. The legend of Aurins began to spread across the desert, a name whispered with a mixture of awe and fear. But these pinprick attacks were not enough. To truly unleash the revolt, they needed a secure base, a deep water port where the British Royal Navy could land supplies, weapons, and gold. They needed the port of Aqaba. There was just one problem. Aqaba was considered impregnable. Its harbour was defended by massive coastal guns, pointing out to sea, daring the British fleet to approach. To the landward side, it was protected by a fortress of nature itself, the vast, waterless furnace of the Nefud Desert, an impassable wasteland of shifting sands and blistering heat, known to the Bedouin as the Sun's Anvil. No army in history had ever crossed it. To the strategists in Cairo and London, an overland attack was not just risky, it was impossible. But Lawrence's genius was to see the impossible as a challenge. He devised a plan of such breathtaking audacity it bordered on madness. He would not go around the desert, he would go through it. He, along with the fearsome warrior Auda Abu Tai of the Hawetat tribe, gathered a tiny force of just 500 men. They would march 600 miles in the height of summer across the most brutal terrain on earth to emerge from the one direction the enemy would never expect, their undefended rear. The journey was a visceral hell. The sun was a hammer, the thirst a constant torment. Men and camels died along the way. But Lawrence drove them on, his own will of iron defying the elements. They emerged from the desert, not as an army, but as an apparition, gaunt and sun-scorched, but filled with a terrible purpose. The Ottoman garrison at Aqaba was lazy, complacent, and utterly unprepared. They were looking out to sea, waiting for British warships. They never thought to look back at the desert. The attack was not a battle, it was a storm. The Bedouin warriors, screaming their ancient war cries, descended on the town in a terrifying camel charge. It was a clash of ages. Modern rifles against the primal fury of the desert. The defenders broke in minutes. Aqaba had fallen. Lawrence, an archaeologist with no formal military training, had achieved one of the greatest strategic victories of the First World War. The capture of Aqaba changed everything. The Arab revolt, now armed and supplied by the British, was transformed from a band of raiders into a relentless army. With Lawrence at their head, they swept north, becoming the right flank of General Allenby's great push into Palestine. They tied down tens of thousands of Ottoman troops who could have been fighting on other fronts. They dynamited hundreds of bridges, captured thousands of prisoners, and ultimately marched triumphantly into the city of Damascus. The 600-year-old Ottoman Empire was broken, shattered forever. But Lawrence's victory was a bitter one. He had fought for a dream of a free and united Arab nation. But in the halls of power in London and Paris, secret deals had already been struck. The Sykes-Picot Agreement, a cynical pact of imperial ambition, carved up the Middle East with arbitrary lines in the sand, creating the artificial states and fueling the endless conflicts that still plague the region to this day. Lawrence, the kingmaker, left the peace conference in disgust, his dream betrayed. Yet his true legacy is not found on the maps he helped to redraw, but in the very nature of modern warfare. He was the prototype of the modern special forces operator. His principles of embedding with local forces, of winning hearts and minds, of using surgical strikes and psychological warfare to paralyze a vastly superior enemy, are now the core doctrine of the world's most elite units, from the British SAS to the American Delta Force. He proved that a deep understanding of culture, terrain, and human motivation can be a far more potent weapon than a division of infantry. T.E. Lawrence was more than a hero. He was a British visionary who saw the future of war. He became a kingmaker who forged a new world from sand and steel. But the world he created remains as unstable and contested as the desert winds themselves. If you believe Britain's history is forged by indomitable legends like this, then smash that subscribe button and join the channel. But what do you think? Was Lawrence a British hero who fought for Arab freedom, or an agent of empire who ultimately betrayed them? Let us know your verdict in the comments below.